parents and twin sister kicked me out at 16. I lived in a tent and struggled for years. Now I have a house, and they showed up uninvited with my sister's family, demanding to move in. When I was 16, my parents kicked me out. Not for some monumental reason, no crime, no big fight. It was a culmination of little things. My parents had always favored my twin sister, Ashley. She was the golden child, the perfect one, the one who could do no wrong. I was the invisible one, the constant disappointment. Even when I did well, it was never good enough. Ashley would get praised for the smallest of accomplishments, while I barely got a nod of approval for anything I did. It wasn't always so obvious, but the favoritism was like a shadow hanging over my life. One evening, I came home after studying at a friend's house. I walked in, and my parents and Ashley were sitting in the living room, looking like they were waiting for me. The air felt thick with tension. I remember every detail of that moment, the sound of the ticking clock, the dim lighting, the way my mom was glaring at me as if I'd committed some unspeakable crime. "Sit down," my mom said coldly. I sat, my heart pounding in my chest. I had no idea what was coming, but I knew it wasn't good. "We've decided it's time for you to go," my dad said bluntly. I blinked, confused. "Go? What do you mean?" My mom sighed, as if I was wasting her time with my questions. "You need to leave. You're 16 now, and we're done putting up with your attitude. You need to find somewhere else to live." I was stunned. "But I haven't done anything wrong. Why are you doing this?" Ashley just sat there with a smug look on her face, saying nothing. She didn't have to say anything, her expression told me everything I needed to know. She was behind this somehow. "We've had enough," my dad continued. "You're ungrateful, lazy, and you don't fit in with this family anymore. We've given you enough chances." I was ungrateful? I didn't fit in with this family anymore? I felt like I was in some sort of alternate reality. I had done everything they asked of me. I kept my grades up, I stayed out of trouble, I didn't cause any problems. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. I had spent my whole life trying to win their approval, and now they were just throwing me away like I meant nothing. I was barely holding back tears. "Where am I supposed to go?" My mom shrugged. "That's your problem now?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They didn't care what happened to me. They didn't care if I had a place to sleep, if I had food to eat. They just wanted me gone. My dad stood up and handed me a duffel bag. "Pack your things. You've got an hour." I packed as much as I could fit into that duffel bag, my hands shaking the whole time. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where I would go, what I would do. I just knew I couldn't stay there anymore. The family I had spent my whole life trying to please had made it clear, they didn't want me. I ended up sleeping in a park that night. I didn't have anywhere else to go. I didn't have any friends who could take me in long term, and I wasn't old enough to rent an apartment. I spent the next few months living in a tent in the woods, scraping by with what little money I could make from odd jobs. I used public restrooms to wash up, and food banks to eat. I was cold, hungry, and scared all the time. But no one came looking for me. No one cared. Eventually, I found a job at a small mechanic shop. The owner, Joe, was a gruff but kind man who took pity on me when he found out I was homeless. He let me crash in the shop's break room until I could get back on my feet. Joe taught me how to fix cars, and I became one of his full-time employees. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it was steady, and it paid enough for me to start saving. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had control over something. Over the next few years, I worked my ass off. I never lost sight of the goal: get out of survival mode, build a stable life for myself, and never rely on anyone else. I saved every penny I could. By the time I was 22, I had enough saved to rent a tiny apartment. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom in a run-down building, but it was mine. I didn't have to answer to anyone, and I didn't have to worry about where my next meal would come from. It felt like freedom. I kept working at the mechanic shop, and over time, I built a solid reputation. Joe would even send some of the more complicated jobs my way. My skills improved, my confidence grew, and so did my savings. By the time I was 30, I had saved enough for a down payment on a house. It wasn't a mansion or anything fancy, just a modest 2-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood. But it was mine, and I was proud of it. I thought that was the end of the story. I thought I had finally escaped my past and built a life that was completely my own. But then, out of nowhere, my parents and Ashley showed up on my doorstep. I hadn't seen or heard from them in over a decade. Not since they kicked me out. So when I opened the door and saw them standing there, with Ashley, her husband, and their 3 kids, I was completely blindsided. "We need to talk," my mom said, her voice clipped. I stood there, staring at them in disbelief. "What are you doing here?" My dad cleared his throat. "Your sister's house burned down last month. They've been staying with us, but it's too crowded. We figured you had room for them here." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. They threw me out like garbage when I was a kid, and now they were showing up on my doorstep, asking me to take them in? "You've got to be kidding me," I said, shaking my head. "You threw me out when I was 16, and now you expect me to take in Ashley and her family?" "We're family," my mom said, as if that explained everything. "Family?" I laughed, a bitter sound that felt foreign in my throat. "You threw me away like I didn't matter. You haven't spoken to me in over 10 years, and now you think you can just waltz back into my life and demand that I take you in?" My dad crossed his arms. "We didn't come here to argue. We came because your sister needs help, and you have the space. It's the right thing to do." "The right thing to do?" I repeated, incredulous. Where was that attitude when I needed help? When I was homeless, living in a tent? Ashley, who had been silent up until this point, stepped forward. "Look, I'm sorry about what happened back then. But we were kids. Things are different now. My kids need somewhere stable to stay, and you have this whole house to yourself. We're not asking for a lot." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was acting like the past didn't matter, like all the pain and suffering I had endured was just some minor inconvenience that I should get over. "You're not asking for a lot?" I snapped. "You're asking me to forget that you and Mom and Dad abandoned me when I needed you most. You're asking me to open my home to the same people who threw me out like I was nothing. Do you have any idea what I went through after you kicked me out? Do you even care?" Ashley shifted uncomfortably, but didn't answer. "I'm sorry, but no," I continued. "I don't owe you anything. I built this life on my own, and I'm not going to let you come in and take it from me. You need to leave." My mom's eyes narrowed. "You're being selfish. We're family. You should help your sister." "Family?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You stopped being my family the day you threw me out. Now get off my property." My dad opened his mouth to say something else, but I slammed the door in their faces before he could get a word out. My hands were shaking, my heart was pounding, and I could feel the hot tears threatening to spill over. But I stood firm. I had spent too many years being a doormat, and I wasn't going to let them manipulate me again. For the first time in my life, I chose myself. Update. It's been a couple of weeks since my parents and Ashley showed up at my house, and the fallout has been intense, to say the least. After they left, my mom apparently called every relative she could think of to complain about how I refused to take in Ashley and her family. Now, I've got aunts, uncles, and cousins coming out of the woodwork, messaging me, calling me selfish, ungrateful, and a bunch of other things I'd rather not repeat. Most of them don't even know the full story, they just hear my mom's side of things and immediately jump to conclusions. I tried explaining what really happened to a few of them, but it's like talking to a wall. They keep telling me, "That was a long time ago, you need to forgive and forget, or family is family, you should help them no matter what." It's infuriating. These are the same people who never reached out to me after I was kicked out, who didn't care whether I was dead or alive for over a decade. And now they're suddenly experts on family loyalty? I've blocked most of them at this point. I don't need that kind of negativity in my life. Ashley sent me a message the other day, trying a different approach. She said she didn't realize how hard things had been for me back then, but she thought we should move past it for the sake of her kids. She said they really needed somewhere stable to stay, and that I had the space, so it only made sense for them to live with me. I ignored the message. I feel bad for her kids, I really do. It's not their fault their parents screwed up, but that doesn't mean I'm obligated to set myself on fire to keep them warm. I've spent too many years fighting to build a stable life for myself, and I'm not going to let anyone jeopardize that. I know that decision might make me seem cold-hearted, but I've come to terms with the fact that I can't save everyone. Sometimes, you have to prioritize your own well-being, even if it means disappointing people. Final update. It's been a few more weeks, and things have finally started to settle down. After the barrage of phone calls and messages, I think my family has realized that I'm not going to bend. Most of them have either stopped contacting me, or I've had to block them to maintain my sanity. It's been a whirlwind of emotions: relief, anger, frustration, sadness, and even a strange sense of closure, but I'm slowly starting to find my peace again. In the weeks after the confrontation with my parents and Ashley, I went through a roller coaster of self-reflection. For so long, I had been harboring this anger toward them, a deep well of resentment that I had buried inside me for years. I think a part of me always believed that maybe, one day, they would realize what they had done, come to me with heartfelt apologies, and we could begin to repair what was broken. But seeing them on my doorstep, acting like nothing had happened, as if I owed them something, shattered that illusion once and for all. It wasn't just the fact that they showed up unannounced. It was the way they did it. They acted as if my entire childhood, the years of being overlooked, the moment they threw me out, and all the suffering I endured afterward, was just some footnote. They didn't come to me with any remorse, any acknowledgement of the pain they had caused. Instead, they came with demands, acting entitled to my space, my home, my life. That stung in a way I wasn't prepared for. I had thought I had come to terms with my past. I thought that by building my own life, I had moved beyond the need for their validation. But when they stood there, on my doorstep, I realized that a small part of me still craved it, the recognition that I had been wronged, the apology I never got. It hit me like a ton of bricks that I was never going to get that from them. They weren't going to change. They weren't going to see things from my perspective. After they left that day, I had to ask myself some hard questions. Could I let go of the anger? Could I forgive them, not for their sake, but for mine? And if I couldn't forgive, how was I going to move forward without letting their presence linger over my life like a dark cloud? I've spent the past few weeks really reflecting on those questions. I realized that the anger I've been holding onto has been like a chain, weighing me down, keeping me tethered to the past. I'm not saying I'm going to forgive them, at least, not right now. But I'm working on releasing that anger. It's not easy. It's a process, and some days are harder than others. But every day, I'm taking a small step forward. I also spent a lot of time thinking about family. For years, I believed that family was everything, that blood ties were unbreakable, and that no matter how much pain they caused me, they were still my family. But after this experience, I've come to realize that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who stand by you when things get tough, the people who lift you up when you're at your lowest, and the people who treat you with respect and kindness. In my life, I've been lucky enough to find my own family. Joe, the mechanic who took me in when I was homeless, became like a father figure to me. He didn't have to help me, but he did, and he never asked for anything in return. The friends I've made over the years, who offered me their couches to sleep on when I was in between places, who shared meals with me when I could barely afford to eat, those people are my family. They've shown me more love and support than my biological family ever did, and for that, I am forever grateful. Speaking of Joe, he passed away a few years ago, and I miss him every day. But I like to think that everything I've achieved since then is a testament to his belief in me. I'm still working as a mechanic, and I've even taken over the shop since Joe didn't have any children of his own to pass it down to. The business is small, but it's thriving. I've made a life for myself that I'm proud of, a life that no one handed to me, and no one can take away from me. As for Ashley and her family, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that they found temporary housing with some distant relatives. It sounds like they're managing, which is a relief. I don't wish any ill will on her kids, they're innocent in all this. But I've made my peace with the fact that I won't be involved in their lives. That chapter is closed, and I don't intend to open it again. That doesn't mean it was easy. There were nights when I lay awake, second-guessing my decision. What kind of person turns their back on family in their time of need? What if I could have helped, even if it meant sacrificing some of my peace? But then I remember what I went through, how they turned their backs on me when I was in my darkest hour, and I remind myself that I have a right to protect the life I built. I have a right to say no. Some of my extended family has still been trying to guilt me into doing the right thing. Even after I blocked most of them, a few persistent relatives found ways to reach out through other people, continuing to call me selfish or cold-hearted. But I've come to realize that these people are speaking from a place of ignorance. They don't know the full story, and quite frankly, they don't care to know. They just want to preserve the illusion of a perfect family, where everyone gets along and helps each other, regardless of the truth. I've stopped trying to explain myself. I don't owe them an explanation. I don't owe anyone anything, really. And that's been the most liberating realization of all. I've spent so much of my life trying to please other people, trying to live up to their expectations, trying to prove my worth. But now, I'm done with that. I don't need their approval, and I don't need their validation. Moving forward, I'm focused on living my life for me. I'm continuing to run the mechanic shop, and I've even been thinking about expanding the business. I've made some great connections over the years, and I've been exploring the idea of opening a second location in the next town over. It's a big step, and it's a little scary, but I'm excited about the possibility. I've worked hard to get to where I am, and I'm ready to take the next step. I've also started investing in my personal life a bit more. For so long, I was in survival mode, just trying to make it from one day to the next. But now that I've built a stable life, I'm starting to focus more on my hobbies and passions. I've always been a bit of a gearhead, so I've started restoring old cars in my free time. It's a nice way to unwind after a long day at the shop, and it reminds me of the early days when Joe was teaching me the ropes. I've reconnected with a few old friends, too. People I lost touch with during the chaos of my 20s, when I was just trying to keep my head above water. It's been nice to rebuild those relationships, to spend time with people who know me for who I am now, not who I was back then. In the end, I've learned a valuable lesson. I don't need to carry the weight of my past with me forever. I can acknowledge the pain, the hardship, and the betrayal without letting it define me. I can choose my own path, my own family, and my own happiness. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. So, for anyone out there reading this who might be going through something similar, whether it's family drama, feeling like you don't belong, or struggling to find your place in the world, I just want to say this: you don't owe anyone your peace. You don't have to let toxic people, even if they're family, take up space in your life. It's okay to say no. It's okay to put yourself first. Thank you to everyone who has supported me through this journey, both in real life and here on Reddit. Your kind words and advice have helped me more than you know. I feel like I've come out the other side of this stronger, more self-assured, and ready to keep building the life I deserve. And to my family, if you're reading this, I hope you understand now that family isn't just about blood. It's about love, respect, and support. I found my family, and it's not you. But I hope you find yours someday.